So yeah, we're almost at the top of the hour. In terms of presentations, that was everything for today. So we do have, again, Bernie Conkin. Bernie's going to be a while. We also have Mark Sokol and Jeremy Reese, and they are at the Secret Space Force Conference in Palo Alto. And let me see if I can get Mark. Oh, and it looks like Mark is not signed on. Okay, he was a moment ago, though. Yeah, if you guys can give me just a sec, I will ping him. Okay, and so Mark is typing. It'll be just a sec. And if we get held up, we can always go to open discussion. Okay, so Mark has panel discussion for the next hour. He was going to do it at 5 p.m. So Mark, that's awesome, man. Let me see, I'll type in 5 p.m. is great. Is Gerald with us? Let me ask if Gerald is here. I just searched and I do not see him. And I do not see Jeremiah pop. Okay, well, do you guys want to do open discussion? Let's just do open discussion. That's no holds barred. And so I guess just unmute yourselves if anybody has anything to share.
Tim, one question on the UAP UFO phenomenon, because it seems to be gaining a lot of momentum, a lot of attention lately, especially after the Navy published about the UFO encounter. How many countries around the world are actively involved in the UFO, and what countries, which country has the most UFO site?
You know, I don't have statistics. I've heard some really interesting things though. It does seem to be gaining momentum, but you know, I think people like me are a great example of that. What back a year before I met Mark, I didn't believe in UFOs, and you know, I've met people who claim to be contactees, and I actually saw a UFO, although I tend to think it was what I saw was the stealth blimp. So, you know, so I assumed that it was ours, and I didn't even assume it was anti-gravity. I just assumed it was a rigid hull dirigible. And so when this UAP story broke, at first I was kind of skeptical. And as you guys know, if you've seen my channel, I do a lot of defense interviews, and there are a ton of people in the defense community who believe in UFOs now, and that number is growing. And what I found is everybody seems to be asking the same questions, right? And so, you know, over time, the more I saw, I was like, okay, I ruled out all the mundane explanations. You know, I've read all the debunking stuff, and it's kind of like, well, it doesn't fit. At some point, the debunking is less believable than UFOs. So it's kind of like, okay, well, you know, so I think it's growing because of that. Just people like me who were like, okay, I can't think of anything better, you know. And the more you read about it, you read about the behavior of these things, and it's like, this is not, this is the other part. It's obviously not Russia or China. This is not adversary stuff. The behavior of these craft or these vehicles or whatever they are, this is not how man-made objects behave. They can't move at those speeds. They can't go from water to air. So you know. Oh, you know, let me go to Oh, I guess we're in open discussion. So Nuno, go for it, sir. You don't have to raise hands now.
Okay. So I just would like to, can you hear me well?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
see you.
So I just I just would like to say to opinions from science regarding quantum entanglement is a subject under study, but in physics, in the standard physics, we cannot do anything without the propagator, without the particle that it interacts. So, and other other thing or other misconception regarding extra dimensions from the general community is that normally people think of extra dimensions as spatial dimensions, but in fact, in physics, in the standard physics models, we look at the possibility of these extra dimensions can be imaginary time dimensions, not spatial time dimensions, but imaginary time dimensions, which corresponds possibility in the future. For example, new class of elementary particles that can exist with not a real imaginary time, but internal in the imaginary time dimension, internal clock. So when we speculate, the general public, when the general public speculates, sometimes we hear in the mediatic medium many concepts and many speculative concepts, but in reality, in science, we must do things in concrete way. Another thing I'd like to say regarding the possibility of instantaneous communications, there is the possibility in physics of discovering new particles which are called tachyonic particles. And if those type of particles are found and we can engineer it, then these particles, as they have imaginary proper time, they can travel much faster than light velocity without violating the Lorentz transformation law or the Lorentz coordinate transformation law. So this how do you say? And also, I'd like to say a very important thing from what we observe of UAPs. I'm not a specialist on this matter. We can say that these devices can produce locally a positive gravitational potential of some sort. We don't know, and this is not predicted by general relativity. So there is the possibility that the observation of this phenomenon also can tell us that general relativity is not a correct theory of gravity. And nobody puts this in question. And I'm not a theoretical physicist, so I cannot go deeper into this subject, but there is the possibility, if we observe real phenomenon like those, I think those phenomena are real, that it's not described as a general relativity prediction. So we cannot say for sure that general relativity is a correct theory of gravity without going to the theoretical details. So this is what I'd like to say today.
Well,
yes.
thank you.
Yes. I'm very happy because my smartphone, one microphone is not working. I'm lucky the other one is working. So this is my personal feeling from this discussion. When from the public perspective, we can speculate many things, but from a scientific point of view, and a laboratory point of view, or standard science, we must work with concrete things.
Yeah.
And if there was the possibility of existing extra spatial dimensions, we probably the scientists, so many thousand scientists around the world, already have seen it. So and there are theories, global unified theories of that try to unify all the forces of nature, and I think they forecast 7 dimensions, 3 spatial, and extra 4 either real temporal or imaginary proper time particles.
You know,
So
you
yes.
mentioned something really interesting. David Chester had mentioned this too, and I'd asked him about quantum entanglement, and yeah, when we were talking, he had talked about that, theories with multiple dimensions for time, and you just mentioned that as well.
Yes.
And yeah,
In physics, in physics, in physics.
Sorry, let me mute Harold for just a sec. He's got some background noise.
In physics, there is mathematical product or name which is called a twister. And there is twister theories in which they play with imaginary proper time, which might correspond to new class of elementary particles. And another thing very interesting of these objects flying in the sky, that sometimes it seems that they disappear from our view. We cannot rule out the possibility that by changing locally space-time geometry, that the photons, instead of reflecting to us, they turn around the vehicle. So this type of technology or vehicles that produce these positive gravitational potentials, possibly they become invisible to us because they bend light around them. You understand?
Yeah, and actually, if I could speak to that, there is a video, and I can put it in chat. It's on YouTube. It's the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico UAP sighting. It didn't get the attention that the others did, but it does appear that there's some kind of gravitational lensing of light around the vehicle.
Yes, this could be possible. From us, we don't know how do they produce this type of positive gravitational potential. But if it's a positive gravitational potential with a new type of particle we don't know yet, then we don't see it because our sensors are sensible to photons only, and we don't have sensors to this new type of elementary particle. So they are already working ahead of us with a new type of elementary particle that we cannot detect even with our eyes. And for this, we don't have a scientific explanation for what we observe. But
Yeah.
this does not mean that scientifically there is a law or a scientific process that we can explain in the future.
Yeah, no, it's
so,
very, and
so for me,
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
As you know, I'm working on Mach effect of weight loss of a gyroscope, and it's completely natural for me that relativity is not the correct theory of gravity. So because a milligram weight loss is not predicted by general relativity, and even more asymmetrically. So I'm not an expert in theoretical physics. I'm just doing engineering, but we can say that nobody knows all the laws of physics, like my professor of physics said once. So by observing this phenomena today that we still don't understand, like electromagnetism in the early times, we didn't understand electromagnetism until we found Maxwell laws, and that solved everything. And with this phenomenon we observe today is the same. We are not understanding well because we don't know the law, the scientific law. But this does not mean in the future the scientists will not discover it. Yes.
Well, and to what you were saying about the gravitational lensing, right? The effects of gravity changing light or causing invisibility or bending light around photons. I just posted a link in chat there. So if and that's again, that's the Aguadilla that was taken by it was a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol plane. It looks like a transmedium object, and it's doing some of the behaviors that you described. So
okay, this is natural. I in my scientific path with my professors in the laboratory, my professor of physics, he was a full professor of experimental physics, and in his free time he participated with other professors in a small group of study in Portugal for UFOs and UAPs, just for documenting what fishermen they would saw while they were at sea and things like this. And I never participated in this because I like to see from time to time this type of phenomenon, but I'm working on my own thing. And professor, sometimes he brought to the laboratory the stories they were discussing this group of the lights the fishermen observed in the sky. And the professor who was responsible for this group, they published a small book or a small journal from 6 in 6 months, in which they try to document in Portugal a little bit this phenomenon. So the professor which I worked with many years in the physics department, he had an open minded to discuss scientifically this type of phenomenon like you are doing in the United States. So what is important is for everyone to understand that nobody knows all the laws of physics. Nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And when we observe something that we don't understand, it's just we must be patient that someday people discover the law. And then it's like before Schrödinger equation or Dirac equation, nobody knew it. When we know it, it's very easy. So it's just a question of the scientists and the community to try to understand what is the law, what is the particle, what is the theory that is behind this type of phenomenon. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
you know, if I could, Jeff had mentioned, Jeff Rainier, you'd mentioned biological, you know, aspects of this also. And you know, that's something that I've been exploring a little bit lately also. And this goes away from the physics side of things. It goes more to the biological part. So one of the things that I've been doing, again, I have kind of an interview channel with influencers. I got into artificial intelligence, and I've done a series of interviews on that, and then it didn't take long before that kind of bridged into the UAP aspect of things. So Jeff, can I ask, is that what you were kind of thinking of? Were you thinking of like advanced biological entities, or were you just talking?
I was, and you know, the marrying of the mechanical and biological, and I just have, my father is big into AI, so he's been doing it since the 70s and wrote a book. I'm more mechanical, but I know what you're talking about, and I actually had an experience, and so that's kind of what, you know, everybody here has had their own thing that happened to them that brought them to this point.
Can I ask what your experience was that shaped kind of your,
well, first off, I come from the programs, the vaults from the 90s. So I worked in a lot of different programs I can't get into, but I didn't see anything directly like alien technology. I'll definitely say that. But I saw a whole lot of things that I was surprised that, you know, there's one thing like, let me give you an example.
and sorry, if I'm not familiar with the vaults. I'm not sure what that means.
Skiffs, classified areas.
Oh, okay.
Environment, and how I can say this is like, everybody knows there's nuclear codes, right? So nuclear codes are classified, but everybody knows they exist, right? And they change.
Yeah.
So what I got introduced to, I didn't know existed. So I don't know, it's not out in public. So that's why that kind of opened my eyes. So then later on in life, I decided to figure out what they're looking for. What do they desire? I can't get the information that I need. They're not going to give it to me, right? They're not giving it to any of us. So how can I get them to come to me?
Well,
let me explain. So what I did was, I had a premise many years ago that they're looking for people with psychic abilities. And that if you were to play, that you really did have psychic abilities, they might come check you out. And so I did this. You look at my last name. I have a relative I'm not related to, who's well known. So because of what I used to work on, they always listen in on me. And so if I played it up on the phone to her, maybe if this is true, they'd come see me. Maybe something would happen. So nothing happened for 2.5 years. And then I happened to be with my wife. We got followed. And you're not going to believe this, but so this happened in Redondo Beach, California. I'm not in Redondo Beach anymore. I'm on Catalina, actually, early in the morning. So a woman who was like 6'6", 6'7" tall, super blonde, super thin, following us with a little lady who's only 5'6". Followed us to a restaurant. We didn't eat. We went to another restaurant. They followed us there. I sat down. My wife was sitting down. The little lady came up, got on her knees, stuck her head up against my head and put her hand up against me like this and pushed my head up against her while the other lady watched, emotionless, at a restaurant, and then got back up, looked at the other one, shook their heads, and then took off. So I had that experience, and that lady who was the 6'7" one was highly unusual. And so ever since then, I've really wondered what the hell's going on, I have to admit. So that's the only experience I've had. I've never seen a UFO, but I have worked on things that are not public.
Yeah.
And so I think the combination of those two is what kind of brought me here.
Yeah. Well, no, I appreciate you sharing that. You know, it's so difficult to tell. I don't know. I know Eric Davis, Dr. Professor Eric Davis, he wrote about psychic encounters, and he explored a lot of different ways that might happen, right? And then the problem is, well, I think the problem is you get so deep into the realm of the subjective, it becomes difficult to know what, so is it them, or is it a projection, or is it something else?
And I feel there's a lot of disinformation out there. And of course, I've read William Cooper way back in the 90s and all that. And I wasn't sure. I'm able to put the 80% that I don't know in the area of I don't know. And I'm just saying that could have been a joke on me, but I never told anybody. It could have been a joke. I don't know. But I've had enough unusual experiences and some other things that have happened. In South America, I was born in Lima, Peru. I wasn't born in the States. My dad worked for the government down there, doing other things I can't get into. And so because of these experiences and being in the vaults that they brought me into, I really do believe there are aliens, and I do believe they're here. And that's my opinion.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I guess my gut feeling is I'm not. The only thing that I'm aware of is the Tic Tacs, I guess, and discs. I've read, again, I've heard contactee stories. I've heard all of the, and I tend to fall back to what's more concrete, I guess.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think a lot of the people out there who claim contact are frauds. I would have to admit. And I think a lot of the videos, they put on the internet. And,
well, I know.
And the context of the video is more important than anything else because of CG. So
I know things. I think things get so complex. Like a good example of that is I read this, and this was an emergency room surgeon who wrote this. He said that he had a patient. It was heart surgery. It went badly. The man was clinically dead for like 5 minutes or something, right? And they managed to bring him back. They managed to get him patched up. And when he started to become conscious, the guy starts reciting this series of numbers over and over and over again, right? And the guy's almost like in a trance. He's, and as he becomes more conscious, he keeps reciting, and finally he starts to become lucid, and he says to the doctor, he's like, write that down, and so the nurse had written this down, and the doctor comes in, and the nurse tells him, she says, okay, well, he's been reciting this over and over again, and this was the surgeon who did the operation. He was talking about the guilt that he felt. He was like, we didn't realize that it would be this bad, and he died on the table, and thank God we were able to bring him back, and so this wasn't a person writing about the experience. This was his surgeon, you know, with all the feelings of remorse that went with that. And so the nurse tells the doctor when he comes in a while later, right? He's all scrubbed up and cleaned, and he's exhausted from this surgery. And she says, "Doctor, you know, he's kind of lucid now, and he's been reciting these numbers over and over again. He had me write them down. I don't know what it means, you know." And so the doctor, he kind of snaps the guy up, and he says, "What's going on? What's going on?" You know, and the patient was this elderly man, and he said, "I know that I died on the table, and I was standing next to my body, and then I was in the air on the room." And he said, I could see everything. And he's like, "I wanted to thank you for saving my life, you know, for bringing me back." And the doctor kind of looks over, and he's like, "Okay, people have these experiences." And the man says, "I know they do." And he said, "And I knew you wouldn't believe me." He's like, "The numbers that I told you are the serial number on top of the ceiling fan." And so the doctor gets up on a ladder. They stop the fan. They get up on a ladder, or the ceiling light, or whatever it was. They check the serial numbers, and that was the serial number from the top, right? There's no way to see that from the, you know. And so that the doctor wrote this big long thing about it. I read this online, and he said he was like, "I'll be damned." He's like, climbed there up on the ladder and checked it, and that was the exact number. And this was a long string of numbers. So things like this happen, right? I mean, and I don't know. I guess it's up to us to find out what the context is. And maybe we never do sometimes.
Yeah, I do wonder, you know, the nice guy that just spoke, Nuno, talked about, you know, 7 dimensions. I've heard 11. And you wonder, you know, there's tachyon, there's quantum entanglement, but what about just psychic? There might be a dimension where people can communicate in the future.
Well, yeah, and then there are so many crossover things too. What's his name? There's the Hammer off Penrose, where they've talked about microtubules, right, and quantum communication, or quantum, yeah. So there's a lot there. Well, Jeff, do you want to write me after the maybe send me an email after the event, and we could talk more. Maybe there are some things that you could share, or something like that you feel comfortable talking about in the future.
Yeah, I'll talk to you in the future. And just so you know, my major field is rockets, so I've designed a lot of rockets.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Here, on 7, 8 rockets and several thrusters. And
yeah, let me put I'll put my email into chat, and that's, yeah. So that's in chat there if you want to shoot me an email.
No problem. Thank you.
We have a session on rockets now. I hope you give a lecture on rockets at some point. One question for
Harold, I've been doing stuff on rockets. I've been doing because I do a lot of defense interviews, and the U.S. government is crazy. And they have you heard about rocket cargo?
Not that I recall at the moment.
The idea is, instead of using a C-130, instead of using a C-130 to transport things, if it's high value cargo, you can actually put it on a rocket, and between the economies of scale and the transport and stuff, they believe that in the next few years it may be less expensive to transport some things with a rocket, like literally rocket ship, you know, than it is to do a C-130, and it's a lot faster.
Well, that especially for the military, that makes sense. Like a SpaceX, take it over there. Oh, yeah. One question I have for Mark Fiorentino, if he's there, that he wrote a book, you know, his book Master of Reality, you know, when he gave a presentation long ago, he talked about the sleep wave and the pressure gradients for propulsion, and he talked about, and I would like to ask him, you know, I think might still be there, about if he can expand on that, if he wrote some paper, technical paper on the sleep wave and the pressure gradient, because I have been using magnetic field pressure gradients in my experiment. And I know that pressure gradients, magnetic field gradient is very important in MRIs.
Mark is here. He might be, let me see, it's 4:22, so he might be doing dinner. A lot of people do dinner and they'll mute it out.
Oh, okay.
I clicked ask to unmute. And you know, guys, I do have things, I have the conference set now so that people can unmute themselves. And in open discussion time, we don't do hands. We just, you know, try not to, we just yell over each other, right?
Oh, but anyways, but I think, you know, it's like the important part is with the UAP, UFO, you know, the propulsion system question. I know that several of the presenters have spoken about the magnetic field. You know, they think about that there's a magnetic field gradient, you know, driving the UFO, the propulsion component, because it's quite a mystery, you know, and it's kind of one of the field of interest that I've been working on this magnetic field doing my experiments anyway. But that one is kind of interesting because for Mark Fiorentino, that he, in his book, Master of Reality, he actually described it, but he did not give, he just gave a presentation, no equation or nothing. And I want to know if he has written any technical paper that he can do.
You know what I can do?
Mm-hmm.
Harold, let me paste Mark's email into chat.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can email him if he doesn't make a reappearance, and I'm sure he will, but if he doesn't reappear, then I just pasted his email in the chat for you.
Yeah, because I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can
absolutely.
I speak? Can I speak?
Yeah.
So from what the gentleman said, probably those flying objects, they are not driven by magnetic field. And the reason is simple. It is possible to change gravity with magnetic field, but the required energy densities are so high, huge, that there could not be feasible a battery inside to support these huge magnetic field densities. So if it's possible, and if they produce the direct positive gravitational field, should be other technology that they can change locally geometry, space-time geometry. Something that we still don't understand or don't know, you see?
Yeah.
And regarding what the gentleman said about psychic communication and other things, I just speculate, could be also new class of elementary particles that exists and produces these effects. We as a scientist, we should be open-minded that we never know all the laws, but through science does not give all the answers to everything that we observe in a certain moment. We should trust the scientific method, that if something is feasible and something is true, someday the scientists will work with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many things we don't understand today, we cannot say the scientists will not work with it in the future.
Well, the reason why I say the magnetic field, because on experiment I have done, I've been able to produce propellerless propulsion with magnetic field, and I put several videos on YouTube demonstrating.
This is completely natural, because magnetic field also can influence gravity, or can the magnetic field is the photons, they behave like a positive density of energy, a positive gravitational potential. See?
Well, they're not a speculation. That is true. But the reason what I'm saying is because I'm using the Newton third law exception. 1820, Ampere discovered the French scientists, which is part of the foundation of electrodynamics, but nobody have used it. And I done the experiment, and sure enough, it worked if you do it right. And I put videos on YouTube to show, hey, I've done it. Here it is, that anybody can decide, hey, either it is real or it is not. And right now I'm keeping my finger crossed, waiting for my patent to be granted. But yeah, I agree with you. There's still a lot of unknown about how magnetic field and intermingle with gravity, but we're learning. And 20 years from now, we may know
Yes,
100 times
Also,
more.
I will give an example. The Maxwell laws we work with, they don't forecast magnetic charge, but there are some theories which in science it's called I don't remember the name. It's a non-commutative algebra in which they proposed solutions to Maxwell equations in order to include magnetic charge. So the Maxwell equations also are not the final law. Many thinkers and many scientists all the world are working on developing the current ideas or the current models. This is why the scientists they are there. You see.
Mm-hmm.
So everything the only thing that it's not possible it's to violate the conservation laws of physics. Many inventors and many people in the society they stand up with claims that violate the conservation laws, and this is something that it's not possible. If something exists or something is workable, should not violate the conservation laws of physics, because this is a fundamental assumption from the scientific community. And sometimes when, the approach to new science or to new findings can be from the scientific world with the scientific method, or from inventors that they can find a principle and later on the scientists work this principle. There is no one way to find new things. And it's possible for inventors to find new principles or new things, but later on it's up to the scientists to explain them and to discover the law. Mm-hmm. You see? So in case you think you have electromagnetic propulsion, you should go, I suggest, you can go to the nearby university to speak with an open-minded professor of physics. There are a few, but there are. And try to interact with someone from standard science as to give a little bit the insight to validate your experiment, you see? Because sometimes we think we are right, but we need the perspective of standard science to look at what we are doing and to understand if it's correct or not according to the standard science. You understand? You got my thinking.
I'm an engineer. You know, I've been an engineer for nearly more than 30 years. You know, I have degrees, aerospace and electronics. I was an aircraft jet engine technician in the Air Force. So I have the technical background. I have spoken to the professor, so but the most important part is show me the money, like they say in the movie. And I mean, show me the proof. You can have a theory, but you have to prove it. And that's what I have done. I have the theory, I did the mathematics, I did the experiment. And what I did, you know, I applied for the patent and I put it on YouTube, the video for people to
hear. And also, it's very important from an inventor side, if one discovers a new principle, that he can forecast a project or a way to make it viable.
It's not a new principle what I'm using. It's like I said, it's been there for 200 years and nobody has figured out how to use it. And I got lucky.
Okay, you are
well
lucky.
Established part of electrodynamic and modern physics. If Feynman, in his lectures on physics, he talked about the same thing, you know, that Ampere 1820 discovered, and he gave an example on the when he talked about Maxwell equation and so on.
But you understand what I'm trying to say. If you are working on something that you believe and your measurements they think it's working, then you should be able to look at it and say, with this, I can do this project, and this could be useful for this and for that. And
you're talking about scaling, I think, scaling it up, right?
Or not necessarily big scaling, but proving a workable principle, proving that it's useful in some way. And with this, then with proven economical viability of a new principle, then things can go with the principle. I must say It's in today's world with thousands, millions of scientists working so many aspects. It's a very low probability someone discovers something new. It's very low. It's not impossible, but it's very low.
That's true. You know, that's one of the reasons what I wanted to talk to Mach Fiorentino, because when he published that book, some of the things he said there I've already verified experimentally, and I want to know what technical paper does he have. And I'm going to email him about it, because I have I make the effort that everything that I do to be verifiable by outsiders. I already have somebody who verified independent from myself.
And Mark still isn't responding yet. He still.
But that's okay. I would write him an email, because I want to know. Likely when I read his book, it's kind of like in line with experiment that I'm doing. And the other part, because Hoyer, Detlef Hoyer.
And Detlef was here earlier, actually.
Yes, I know he left. And he, in his presentation, the first presentation he gave, he put the field of physics for new proportion. I mean, it was very large. Basically, he made a map of the geography where of the territory where the new proportion technology will be found. And then on the second one, he kind of narrow it down, and he proposed the idea of the triangle. And that really struck me, like, my God, the guy is on to something, because I was doing, trying to represent how does Ampere, the principle of Ampere, using the principle of orthogonal currents, two orthogonal current in which one, for example, one electric wire where he discovered horizontal, they say electric current flowing in one direction, and then you have the other electric current flowing in the perpendicular direction, and one wire exerts a force on the second wire, but the second one does not create a force, an equal and opposite force on the first wire, and that is a reactionist proportion project. Except in a complete circuit, they cancel out. But if you use the magnetic field only, then there you have pure reaction and proportion. And that's what I found out, that I analyzed it, did the equation and everything. Anyway.
Well, Harold, what you're talking about almost reminds me, Bill Alexhand, Bill, yes, he heard his name. Bill Alexhand has been, Bill, we're in open session. You don't have to raise your hand, sir. Just jump in. But, Bill.
Yeah, Tim?
Yeah,
can
Bill,
you hear me okay?
Yeah, and Harold was talking about magnetic circuits and magnetic induction. Right. Actually, he was talking about.
I just want to mention to everyone that, they seem to interpret modern physics as like the law of the land, and it isn't. It really isn't.
I agree.
And that's because, what we have today in modern physics is what they call Maxwell equations, right? And it's like the law of the land, and it isn't. It isn't. What happened is that this guy by the name of Heaviside, I believe it was Heaviside.
Yes, Heaviside.
Took the original Maxwell equations, which were done in quaternion. You have to in electrical engineering, you have to do quaternion math to get the whole picture. Okay, because you're dealing with multi-dimensions.
Yeah, and Heaviside,
all kinds of really cool stuff. But the thing is that this guy by the name of Heaviside came along and just screwed everything up, okay, with the edited version of the Maxwell equations. And so we get this little confined model that we work with, and it's like it's our God. Okay, we are to worship it. And it's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. And it's not the complete model. And I've proven that with my technology here of this Tom Bearden scalar wave theory.
Bill, the reason I mentioned you a moment ago was Harold was talking about. So Harold, what you were talking about fits with the scalar stuff that Bill has been working on. You guys should be talking. Yeah. I'm going to go use the restroom really quick, but you guys should be talking because what you're working on, it sounds like, Harold, he's it sounds similar to like what Bearden's working on with the Meg, where you're generating a
Yeah.
force
Yeah, you set
without
up
the
these
back.
converging magnetic fields.
Yeah.
Now, what classical physics would say
Okay.
is that, well, the fields just cancel, end of story. And it isn't. It's
That is
not,
true.
because you're setting up these stresses. Okay, that's acting on the materials as well.
Well, that is true, because when you have one of the things experiment I did was I put one magnetic field orthogonal to the other magnetic field vector. One is moving, the other one is stationary. When one is moving and the other one is stationary, there is a proportion force that happened between those two. And you ask, and what I did, you know, that when you have that, you have what's called reactionless proportion, because it agrees with Ampere original discovery. If you go to the 1820, and let me see, I have the book here. He gave it, and it was published in 1820. I will tell you the name of the, okay. In this book, you can see page 85, when he published, when Ampere, it's called The Theorem of the Non-Existence of Interaction Between Orthogonal Current Elements. And that's where he shows the discovery that something odd is happening. He violated Newton's third law, which during his time, it caused a lot of argument and discussion among the great scientists of the time. And so here we have something dormant for 200 years that nobody have used. And suddenly, you know, there is an application for it, you know, producing proportion. And because it's using magnetic field, the things about magnetic field, the magnetic field do not violate each other. If you put the Newton third law exception on a search on the internet, you're going to find some people actually explain it and show that it's there. But what I found is that nobody have done anything to utilize reaction in reactionless proportion, because everybody think it is impossible, that you're violating some law of nature. Well, there is room for new laws of nature.
Of course. Harold, I have a question for you. Which city are you speaking of? And
I am here down in California.
And how easy it is for you to go to the university and to speak with professors of physics and
I
to
already
present?
done all that. It's
Okay.
already done deal.
They are open. They are open-minded. It's easy for you to find open-minded.
The open mind is very simple. You know, you can explain anything to them, as long as if you can propose anything, but you have to prove it. If you can prove it, then you know, because then there might be something new there. But if you cannot prove it with an experiment and show it definitely, that means you're wrong. Period. That's it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I spend a lot of time trying to talk to professors, and then 99% just ignore my emails, and it's almost impossible. So I went to talk directly to them. They're more welcoming when you talk to them directly than by email. But you know, you're not paying them, so they don't care. It's as if you're not their student. So it's very difficult to talk to professors in general.
Well, the professors, I mean, it doesn't matter, because, you know, 100 professors can say no, but if they are wrong, I mean, you know, you're just basically pissing off 100 professors if you can prove them wrong. So I'm not interested very much in doing that on offending people, proving them wrong. I'm mostly interested is like, okay, if my device works, here it is, you know, prove it yourself. That's my
well, Harold, look, the profs are just going to blow you off.
Yeah,
okay? Because it's not in their textbooks.
True,
Okay?
I agree.
The latest Maxwell equations are in their textbooks, and that's what they teach. All right. And when you look at this kind of technology, it's not in there. It's not there. So therefore, it does not exist.
Yeah.
Okay. There's something wrong with what you're doing. No, reality doesn't work that way.
But if we are lucky to find open-minded professors, there are a few.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good luck. Come on.
Yes.
It's
Yeah, I did try UCSD, UCLA, and New York University, some university in Ottawa, Carleton, on University of Ottawa, Sherbrooke, my own university. They don't reply. They don't care. They don't have anything to gain from you because you're not their student.
Right, exactly.
Well, I think you could almost use the parallel, you know, I mean, in a very real way, science is the religion of our age, and you guys would be like monks where you're working semi-solitary in meditation, contemplation, developing new things, and your mainstream guys are kind of like I don't know what you call them, your clergy, you know, they're doing marriages, they're teaching what the book says, and they're not stepping outside the box, right? So, you know, I mean, in a weird, messed up sort of way, it probably is the way it should be. And they maintain the status quo, and then you guys are going beyond that. And
I
someday
agree
they will
with you. I
catch.
second that because it's true. Because this conference is about new idea, open mind, taking everything, you know, some of the people, some of the speakers, the presenters may not find an audience someplace else because everybody, well, if it is not a standard teaching, then it doesn't work, even though it may work, you know. So it's bringing something new, you know, keep an open mind, get an idea, because we're not, you know, from being in this conference, you know, I already have different viewpoint, you know, Detlef Hoyer, when he presented the stand about the fifth dimension, all those things, that's interesting, that's good, you know, something that I found out, you know, it's part of my application, you know, which I was doing at that time. And Mark Fiorentino, when he presented the sleep-wake drive, that's another important thing.
Yeah, all said it's true. I can say on my side, I could found open-minded professors here in Portugal who helped me to understand the fundamental theoretical physics. And then at a certain time, at a certain point, I am autonomous in my study. So when I speak to the professors, I speak in their own language. You understand? Because I grew up in the physics department of the university. I start working with the professor of cryogenic superconductors when I was 19 years old. So to speak with the professors or to speak with scientific people, we need to know their language to express ourselves in their language. And this is not easy. But many professors are closed-minded, as already said, it's true. But there are a few who are open-minded. There are also professors and people in the scientific world who are a little bit outside of the box thinkers. But unfortunately, the system is designed in such a way, if a professor says something that risks the credibility of the institution he is working with, then he could be fired. You understand? So we should look.
I know some professors in Portugal are doing interesting, you know, leading edge proportion work, because I have read several papers. You know, I don't recall the name of one of them right now, but I know one that is from the University of Portugal in Lisbon. I read
Porto. Wait. Porto is in the north of Portugal. Lisbon is in the south. Lisbon is the capital.
Well, somewhere in Lisbon, the university, I know he had written several papers, and in conjunction with some Argentinian professors. I mean, I know that there's one in Portugal that is doing interesting leading edge work in proportion. I haven't read his papers, you know, I read about a couple of years ago, but I know somebody in Portugal is doing at least one. That I know.
So just to say that being an outsider can be also a very good opportunity.
It is,
but it is
an outsider looking in.
And only a few have the courage to be outside thinkers.
Yes.
this is
Well,
very
look,
good.
I appreciate your comment. You know, we all
You
have
see?
open mind here, and it's okay to disagree because everybody here in this conference agreed to disagree. We don't have to be in
Yes.
agreement all the time
Yeah.
together.
Yes, of course.
You know, and
That's
it
how you
reminds
gain new
me of,
knowledge, new
The
viewpoints.
joy of being outside thinker is that we find new things.
Yes.
Because
well,
you see, this
and
this is a joy, and we don't learn to be outside thinker at university. It's something born with. We are born with thinking. We like to think, and we like to see things other perspective. And this is very important.
Yeah.
I think cross-pollination is really important also.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that I like about this conference is, you know, we don't always find ideas or inspiration where we're looking for them. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's like lightning, right? You don't know where it's going to come from or where it'll strike.
This is the real thing you just said. For
Yeah.
example, I don't know if you heard, now in Europe, we are facing a big crisis, a big energy crisis. The Russian has cut the gas to Europe. I spoke with some German friends. The gas price already doubled, and they said it will double again. And we are facing a very huge energy crisis in Europe, and this will force politicians to look for solutions. And some of them, they will ask the outside of the box thinkers to give suggestions on where the new solutions or the new technology can come. In the United States, you don't have energy crisis. You don't have.
That's a good viewpoint you have. You know?
Well, yeah, and you know, I would say, Nuno, I would say that even in the United States, gas prices in some areas, California especially, gas prices are pushing, maybe even exceeding $6 per gallon gas, right? And in liters, that's much higher. So
I'm speaking, perhaps I apologize, my English is not good. I'm not speaking about the gas for the car. I'm speaking of the gas, the liquid gas that comes, that North Europeans people use to heat their homes in the winter.
Natural gas.
I apologize for my English.
Oh, it's
You see?
okay. No need to apologize. We understand you very well.
Since you brought up the subject, there's a salt water, their car running on salt water. They're very powerful. They have 900 horsepower. I don't know why this is not mainstream yet, but it can replace like regular gasoline engines very easily. So
yeah, Phil, you'd have to be more specific about because I know there are a lot of different innovations, a lot of different like branches in that avenue. So do you know which one, who did this, or?
Yeah, I can Google it if you I forgot the name of the company. It's just Google salt water gas.
Then another one that I saw, and it wouldn't solve anybody's problems, but it works, is I actually have a Paul Pantone Geet engine, and I'll be damned if the thing doesn't work. Basically what he did was he moved combustion outside of the cylinder, and he's basically using a Rank-Hilsch tube for combustion, and it has some advantages. I mean, it won't solve any of today's problems, but the cylinders run cooler, the oil lasts longer, you know, and it works like he said. It doesn't do everything he said. He said that it would run on water and stuff, and he played a little fast and loose with some of that, but I've seen it up close, and I bought one from him, and it works.
Nice.
That's one of the benefits that we have of all this progress in technology, that there are always new things coming up, and new and better things will come up as we continue making progress. We have a lot of smart people on the planet right now.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you know, speaking of which,
stupid people too.
this is a little nerd. I don't know if you guys are Apple guys. So I just upgraded my iPhone. The iPhone 14, it's similar to the old ones, but if you're an iPhone user, iOS 16, which goes back, right, that'll work on any of your old phones. iOS 16 is the one to upgrade to. This is really nice, has nice lock screen and all that. So the new phone itself, I'm not seeing a lot of change, but the operating system, if you haven't upgraded yet, that's free for anybody who's on Apple. And unfortunately I can't speak to Android. I don't use Android, but I know they're always doing improvements too. So
yeah, the Android uses a garbage collector that's kind of sluggish. The interface is less efficient than on the iPhone because it uses a garbage collector. The applications are written in Java. But to answer your question, it's Nano Flow Cell Quant Esports Limousine. The company is Quant that uses the saltwater engines.
okay, well, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why this is not mainstream. It should be Tesla. It should be pretty much everybody. So it's been there for a while too. So
I mean, I get the impression that the status quo, you know, science and technology, it's kind of like people putting in their time, right? They come into work, they do what they're supposed to do, they read the textbooks they're supposed to read, and then they go home for the day. And you know, and maybe that's the difference, is that open-minded people like in this conference, and you know, like the few professors that Nuno had talked about, you know, that they're, you know, what was that Kennedy quote? And he stole that from somebody else. It's some men see things the way they are and ask why. Other men see things the way they never were and ask why not.
That's the quote. That is the quote.
it's funny
George Bernard Shaw. That was George
Yeah.
Bernard Shaw. Yeah.
I must say also, innovation. We are speaking about innovation in general, and all people want, all the societies want innovation. But if we look to the educational systems across the world, several countries have different educational systems, some of which promote better innovation than others. You see, so also I don't know so well how it is in the United States, because I'm not so much into the United States culture as I'm on Europe. But from a professor Portuguese professor who works in the United States, from a speech he gave here in Porto at university, he criticized a little bit that there is in the United States, the educational system, professors, so much competition, they must move from one university to the other. They cannot place roots on one place. And this kind of competitive system also does not allow someone to think, to have a free thinking. And when the professor has a job, he cannot be a free thinker, because he must earn his salary to feed his family. Then we cannot expect him to be open-minded, you see.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we should look also how education system works worldwide, to understand what are the difficulties in the innovation process across several countries. In the United States, from what I have heard, the most important key quality of the United States Americans is entrepreneurship. An American sometimes have the ability to build their own things, to do their own things without the need of university. And this is a quality of the Americans, the courage to go, yes, like these small thinkers here in this group. So, and Europe is more difficult, because Europeans don't have the United States culture. So innovation in Europe also exists, but very slow process. For example, the Bluetooth system was created in Sweden, because Sweden had the conditions for them to develop Bluetooth, and we all use Bluetooth today. So also the professors are subjected to an educational system that more or less gives more or less freedom of action and thinking. And so we should not blame the person who is subjected to a system.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And you know, What I found is, you know, I'm a little bit more familiar with Asian and American interactions, but I would say Asian culture tends to stress mastery of skills more than American culture does. And so, and this is just my personal experience, but my experience has been that in Asian cultures, the focus is less on innovation necessarily than it is on mastery of basic skills. And certainly, you know, statistically speaking, Asian students in American schools do better. And a lot of that is because their families stress, okay, you know, but before you go out and innovate, you've got to master the basics. And I think in, you know, in American society, one of my worries is that in some ways we're losing that, right? Is that we focus so much on individuality that you know, and entrepreneurship, as you've mentioned, that
For example, I give you an
no,
example
no.
from Portugal. Yes.
But it's true that Americans, they motivate innovation a lot. There are big grants. The government gives huge grants for deep tech. They don't do that in Canada. They don't do that anywhere in Europe. Not that I'm aware of. But that's fundamental. You know, that's deep tech. That's the most important top part of technology that does not exist yet. And I think that's very important. And you know, hats to United States for that. Hats off for that. So I respect that a lot.
For example, I give you an example from Portugal. Portugal is a very poor country. And the professors, almost only a very few professors gets funding for their projects. The majority of the professors, they go to the university, they give their classes and they come home. Standard. And for example, I get my things going from the technicians, help from the technicians from the university. I go to the workshop of the mechanical engineering, and they are very helpful. And from I don't interact so much with professors. Of course, I have professors to which I interact because they are responsible at the university. But I mainly interact with the technicians because they have the practical skills, the practical knowledge of working with things and making things. Okay. And so Portugal is an example, which as Portugal is very poor, the universities, there are not so much innovation at universities.
Well, Lisa, I remember the professor Mario J. Pinero, Universidad.
Oh,
Lisbon.
Professor Pinero, I know him. I know him very well. Oh, Professor Pinero. So, you know, Professor Pinheiro is a professor who is specialist in electromagnetic propulsion, yes, and alternative things for electromagnetic propulsion.
He has done interesting work.
Yes. From the theoretical side, he's a very good professor, and he is only assistant professors. This is a good example. A professor who is not a full professor, who is uses creativity, and he also cooperates with MOD of Japan, Takashi Musha, Mr. Musha from MOD in Japan, and he tries to think, to be a out-of-the-box thinker, you see. So Professor
great work. I have read his paper, great work. Yes. I mean, and so, he's really at the leading edge, you know, bringing new ideas.
Oh yes, but then some professors, they launch ideas, but we need someone to implement them, and there is difficulty in the practical side from some proposals. You understand? But Professor Mário Pinheiro, I think he will retire in 2 or 3 years, and he is one of the professors I speak with, and he is an example of a professor not being a full professor of physics. He's only assistant professor, but he thinks out of the box.
Yes, I agree with that. He has done very interesting where he's pushing the boundary. I mean, too bad that he cannot get funding, because if he does the experiment that he proposed and able to do that, then he can expand the boundary with the experimental result, which is very important. You know, like
I've heard of Pinheiro as well. It's been a while though. Can you tell me what he's specialized in? I'm thinking I'm thinking of Frank.
Professor Mário Pinheiro, he's assistant professor at Lisbon University, and he has some written papers with Mr. Takai Musha from Japan MOD. And his main specialties is electromagnetic propulsion theory.
Okay, so and it's MHD, right?
He proposed, I don't know what that is, it means MHD.
Oh,
He proposes some models that with electromagnetism you can drag the ether, I think, on the outside the ship and achieve propulsion. You see, because this is a very interesting concept from Professor Pinheiro, because you know the quantum vacuum fluctuations and the Casimir effect.
Yes.
So these quantum vacuum fluctuations, some of them are from electromagnetic origin. So it's quite natural that with magnetism or electromagnetism, if we can influence these quantum fluctuations, that we can achieve a little bit propulsion. And I think this is the type of work that Professor Mário Pinheiro works. So I never studied his articles in detail, but he is like he in his concept. He considers the ether or the medium around the ship like a medium that with electromagnetic field you can
With the
interact and
electrodynamics.
push.
oh, and
And-
Tony is saying that both of these. Tony, would you like to jump in? Tony is saying that both of these individuals came to his SPCIF conferences, and Tony, these were back around 2012, 13-ish, right?
Well, I think they came both to the one that you can hear me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The conference that me and Paul did out in Albuquerque, they came to that one also, and then also
yes,
to my.
yes. Professor went to STIFE conference in Albuquerque. Yes.
Yeah.
He said to me, the name of the professor is Mário Pinheiro.
Yeah, I've heard his name so many times.
Yes,
But
someone is asking what is his name.
He had done interesting work, especially when he came up with the idea of fluidic electrodynamics.
Yes.
That was really, throwing a monkey wrench and everything, because that kind of expanded the boundary right there. I mean, so new concept, good for the theoretician to explore, because it's very hard to get funding for things like that.
Yes. Professor Mário Pinheiro, he is an outside of the box thinker, and he is isolated in his work because he does not feel comfortable, or he did not found the proper institute to promote new ideas. And he said to me once, I can say because I think it's public, he said, no, for some professors, science is like a religion. So they have this fixed belief and people don't change the belief. You understand? Yes. And I think Professor Mário Pinheiro, some years ago, he created his own institute in Lisbon, and he created a web page of electrodynamics for promoting his ideas. You see?
Oh, I didn't know that.
But you see, this is the difference. In Europe, some professors who are outside thinkers, they have difficulty to get funding and to get their projects going. And in the United States, perhaps an outside thinker can convince a billionaire to and easily get some funding just to test. You see, Europe.
Yeah, and there are limits. There are limits on that. Now, I would say there are limits to how you can get private funding. There are limits to how futuristic it is, how far outside the box, right? So yeah, there's a lot of innovation funding, but like for instance, right now, rockets are the things. I mean, they're still the thing, right? But the private rocket industry, and so there's a lot of funding out there looking for rocket engine makers and things like that. But when you get into electromagnetic propulsion, you're farther outside of the comfort zone of those funders, and so
and I can say why. And you know why? Because in the United States, everything must be regulated by the FAA. And if you want to develop something new, you must prove to the authorities that it is safe. and the authorities must give the permission for this technology to be used. And this is, and the rockets for the moment is the only belief people have, the only thing to go into space and to be used to go to space. And here in Europe, for example, we also have a European authority that if someone develops a new technology, we must have the technology authorized, or there is a business special name to be credited, or to be, I don't know what is the business name for this, to have something registered or something authorized by the authorities. You see? But
now one thing that does interest me, and I see this as a path towards evolution, is I'm really excited about electric VTOLs, right? Like you've probably seen the Jetson one. Have you seen the Jetson one?
Yes, yes. The vertical takeoff landing.
Exactly. Now those by themselves, those are not that interesting, right? I mean, it's incredibly outdated technology. But what interests me about it is, from a business case, if those catch on well enough that people start to use those to commute, and in China, actually, there's a company called EHang that's doing this as well, and they're VTOL taxi companies. If people start to realize that commuting in 3 dimensions is faster, then I think that it will drive innovation in that area. And so that, you know, that's not rockets, that's commuter transport, but it affects so many more people, right? Because with a rocket, I mean, what are the odds that any of us are ever going to be involved with that? But, you know,
you just saw the latest launch from Blue Origin failed, and you saw this. They launched a payload with the scientific instruments, and they had to abort the launch. So, and we had the image that Blue Origin had things very well controlled. You see?
Yeah.
So even with strict quality control, things can go wrong with rockets. So rockets, it's still very dangerous.
Yeah.
Regarding VTOL, from my knowledge, Europe legislation from the European community is starting to allow or to be open that this can take place. But sincerely, those type of technology, they are very loudly and they last only 20 minutes. So it's very limited.
Yes,
still.
yes, they're
Today
very
it's
limited.
But with progress.
And I think it will drive innovation. I think once it starts to, you know, once it starts to catch on, people will look for a better way. You know what I mean? That's my hope, is that once they see it's possible, they'll want to do it better.
At present in Europe, we have the war in Ukraine. So at present, the urgent topic is to solve the energy crisis. And I think in the future, this winter will be very hard for the Germans and for the North Europeans because of the cut of the gas source from Russia. And I think many people will look for solutions for innovation in the energy sector. I think it's the priority now in Europe.
Oh, and so Bernie just told me that he's back. Bernie's back. So Bernie, I'm waiting for Mark, if Bernie is here, and we're in open session. So just, okay. And he said about 15 minutes. And then, and again, I'm hoping that Bernie can talk about low energy nuclear reactions. And then Mark.
I just think to solve this energy crisis, people will go back to these small nuclear reactors. They are being developed. The small sized ones that
it seems like that's the fastest path, right? I mean, because there's a pressing energy solution there.
Yes.
So and then about 5 more minutes and Mark will be ready, and we'll see how things are going with Mark. I may hand off host control to Mark for a bit, and then I can make dinner for my child and all that. So
it's already very late in Portugal. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I must say goodbye to you all.
Yeah.
And
Nuno,
congratulations for your discussion forum. I think it's very useful. And someday perhaps a politician or a billionaire will come to the group, and then we'll want to interact more with you. Let's hope.
Thank you
And
for the good wish.
okay, Harold, we can never say a billionaire will come and you say, Harold, let's put it working.
Everything is possible.
Okay,
Thank
so all the
you.
best from Portugal. Thank you very much for
Give
all
my
the best.
best to
Have a
Professor
wonderful evening,
Pinheiro.
sir. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
evening.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you.
Harold, I've been secretly admiring your room in the background. Did you just repaint in there?
No, it's been the same color.
I for some reason I never noticed it before. Maybe it's the lighting.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. It's just the nice white contrast with the the white fixtures and the blue.
The turquoise blue, yes.
Yeah.
I like it myself. Kind of keep me relaxed. It's a relaxing combination of color. The white with the turquoise blue. But that's what. But hey, oh, we're having a good session today. That's great.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's pretty mellow.
a lot of back and forth too, which is important, because that's the idea, Everybody,
Mark Fiorentino just said he's back. You had a question for Mark, right?
Yes, I do. Is he
Okay.
available there? Put him.
Yeah, there he is right there. Yeah, Harold was asking earlier about he had a question.
Yeah. What I want to know is, in your book, Master of Reality, you brought the idea of the sleep wave, the pressure gradient, and then you go on to describe how to develop propulsion system and so on. And that I have done in some of my work, I've seen, that it makes sense, and I've been doing something similar like that. So I want to know, have you published any technical paper in which you expand the idea from the mathematics, from the physics viewpoint in which you explore it?
Not for the slip wave, for the gravity theory. Yes, I have on my website. You can go to the front page there. There's a link. There's a link right at there's a series of buttons, and you go down, and there's a research paper on the unification of gravity, inertia, and mass. That paper has got one little glitch in it I need to fix, but other than that, it's in the Newton's area, Newtonian area. I need to change the formula there. But other than that, that explains the unification of force of gravity, which is based on the old ether theory that I found was correct in my research, and it needs to be brought back. It's the correct model instead of the quantum model is not usable. It's still suited for a theory of everything.
Oh,
so,
Mark, could you let me see. Pablo is asking you what your website is.
www.super-relativity.com, super-relativity.com.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for interrupting.
You got links to blogs and all that stuff there as well. But the slip wave is the key discovery of how particles move. And using that knowledge, I was able to extrapolate over to a system that can be used, that I believe that the alien technology is using. It's the most sensible, logical approach, which we've all discussed on here many times, either magnetogravitic or electrogravitic. These methods work because they're manipulating the fundamental field, which is the ether field, which is a quasi-elastic solid. So you bend that thing, you create a force, either the magnetic force, the electrostatic force, the gravitational force. So the key to creating a field that the UFOs use, obviously, they're not using rockets, they're not using jets, and they're not using ion propulsion. They're using a spatial bias drive. Let's just get right to it here. And if we want to get going, that's the road that we got to follow. That's the path. And so I'm doing experiments right now. You guys have inspired me. So I've started doing my own experiments. I built my own lab, and I bought all the equipment, and I'm running experiments now. Hopefully I can generate enough energy to create the anti-gravity field. But that's a tough thing to get into because it's suppressed. wickedly by our government. I mean, they don't kid around. If anybody gets close, they knock them down. And that and any kind of energy work that we're going to do, any kind of unity gain kind of a system that comes into being gets crushed. And I know for sure, because I've talked to people who've worked in the energy field, in particular power company, who worked in the patents office, who said they have patents that they bought and shelved. And they said these patents could change the world. So there's people making the discoveries, but they're getting suppressed over and over again. And somehow we're going to have to get by that. Some way we're going to have to be creative and run the end around these guys that are shutting everybody down. So definitely my book outlines in great detail how we could go about the one thing that you hit on is the slip wave thing and the mathematics. I wish I could team up with a physicist because I know the model. And from the model, you can derive the equations. Unfortunately, I'm not a highly skilled physicist or mathematician. It was a miracle I worked out the gravity problem. I mean, it was just after many years of working it out. And then I realized Newtonian mathematics, differential equations, rank 2 tensors were the right path. And I was able to find a physicist who trained me on the math. I said, I want to learn these equations because I know how to use them. And then from that, I wrote the paper. Once I had that all worked out, I put it into a computer program and set it all up to prove that gravity comes about. Gravity is really nothing more than a contraction of space. And then how does that happen? Since space is a fundamental field, the ether, you cause it to contract. So in some way, particles or particle motion is the way to do that. And if particle motion, which is basically in my book, I tell you, is accelerated, unbalanced charges, when they move in this manner, causes a contraction around the particle itself. So anti-gravity is just the opposite. So we have to find a particle, typically an electron, which can be used to create an expansion of space. That's how the slip wave works.
Yeah, because that's what I was looking when you talk about from designing, the slip bias drive, using magnetic field, and somehow you place, and you start spinning, and I was looking for the mathematics because I have done experiment. I'm still doing experiment using magnetic field and how magnetic field create reactionless proportion and propellant proportion. And so, and because you using the slip wave from the particle viewpoint, more likely you are on one side and I'm talking, my research is leading from the other side. So I wonder, where is the comparison and contrast? And that's what I was asking, if you have done the mathematical model that I can compare with mine so that I can, because I still do an experiment. I need to do more, but I'm getting there.
Well, the whole thing with the magnetic field is a rotation of space. And that only happens when there's charge in motion. So the magnetic field is really a secondary, it's an emergent field. Whereas the electrostatic field, the things that all particles are made up of, a charge, the Coulomb force, is a primary field, a foundational field that exists within the ether. It's a structure. It's a wave-like, small waves. And when those waves exist, they're basically twists. So that causes the motion, because this twisting of the structure of the electrostatic field, which is either clockwise or counterclockwise, creates a pressure gradient from the front to the back. and that's what causes the motion.
Yeah, you were
So-
describing
so
vortex.
This would really get back to Heaviside and Maxwell. These guys were the closest on that. So if you want to study those guys and the equations they came up, especially anything concerning vortex and torsion fields, there's where the equations may already exist. And they may be sitting back there because the equations I use for the unification of force of gravity were over 200 years old. I had to piece them together into a system of equations. That's what you'll see in that paper that I wrote. So you execute this system of equations, you generate all the pieces necessary to calculate the mass of a neutron and proton.
Oh, okay.
So and so I'm able to predict it exactly without any need for something that's this big crutch in science, which is the gravitational constant, which is an ad hoc number they came up with that describes a force of attraction. So if I can predict mass without using the gravitational constant or any constant really other than the speed of light, which I don't use exactly the speed of light because the particles inside the neutron and proton are not moving at the speed of light. They're moving at 99% the speed of light. And you will find another paper that I did 4 or 5 years before that gives me the number. I calculated out exactly what the speed of the quarks are inside of the proton and a neutron. And it just so happens I needed that number to complete the second paper. It's kind of an odd coincidence that out of the blue, I would work on that and write programs to calculate that and then need that number later to finish the other set of equations. So it's a miracle that I got that far, but you're on the right track. And so in order to get the equation necessary for the slip wave formula, which is something that Einstein was working on, as it turns out, he too realized that you need to find the cause of particle motion. Physics, they don't deal with it. Particle motion, you ask a person about how particles move, a physicist, and then they'll go, oh, you're getting deep into the foundation. There's no explanation for that. There has to be, because without particle motion, we don't have the magnetic field and we won't have the gravitational field.
You're talking about the trefoil for the particle motion, because that's what
the trefoil is the geometry.
The geometry, how the particle move to create the motion inside the particle.
That's an accelerated motion of unbalanced charges. The trefoil pattern. Well, I got that. I knew I had to find that pattern, and I looked all over the place until I found it in a near-death experience of all places.
Because it looked like it is. It will produce a non-symmetric force.
It creates
that would create the motion of the particle.
The motion of the particle, the slip wave, is active inside of the quarks because they too are vortex-like. Quarks, in my theory, are basically parts of electrons and positrons. It's no coincidence that they're either 2/3 or 1/3 of a charge of an electron or a positron. And we know when we smack them hard enough together, an electron and positron, quarks come out of that crash. So there's your evidence that has yet to be interpreted properly, but it's right there in front of their faces. And so in this configuration, those partial charges are stable. They form a stable geometry, especially in the proton. That thing lasts the time of the entire universe, but not the neutron if you isolate it. And there's a reason why, if you use intelligent design theory, why the neutron is unstable. And I tie that all together. I don't know if you've gotten to that point in the book yet.
I read the book, yes, and kind of
Okay.
the part that got my attention was because I'm looking from the viewpoint of if I want to build a propulsion engine that can deliver, propellant throws. And so it looks like on the sleep-wave drive, especially since I have been using magnetic field gradients to create a propulsion force, then that would make sense. So I wanted to know what is the mathematics
You
behind
want,
it.
well, you want to change that a little bit and try your method first, but you should try to create a vortex structure using moving magnetic fields.
Already
That's-
done all that. That's what my work is
okay.
based on.
Okay,
That I'm
good.
using the Ampere theorem of the forces between orthogonal magnetic fields.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We need to get that math. And I'm thinking about it all the time. That's what I do. I'll think about something for weeks, months, even years. And eventually it matures in my brain and I'll come up with some sort of an equation for it. But, I'm getting pretty old now, so I'm running out of time here.
Well, with the
And
new
guys, just to jump in,
enhancing technology, you can live longer.
I believe that Jeremy Reese is going to be, I believe him and Mark are going to be doing some conference updates. And then after that, we're going to Bernie.
We adopted it.
All right.
Oh, Jeremy?
Thank you.
Yeah, we're having
Okay.
trouble with the camera right now. We're just working on it. Just give us a moment.
I'm gonna have to reset in order to fix this problem.
It sounds like a science problem, and it is all of those things.
So I'll be right back.
I would say
I'm gonna have to restart my computer, and then I'll have a camera. I'll be right back. Give me 5 minutes.
Okay.
Hey, Tim, I'm just, I got the other computer up now. I'm just 5-10 more minutes loading the videos to the right spots and I'll be ready as well.
Good deal. Okay. Well, yeah. And so, yeah, I would say with Jeremy Reese, he's reloading. So he'll be in a few minutes. And then I'm going to ask them to hand it off to you. And and again, just try to be aware not to do, if possible, don't do sound on anything that's copyrighted. It seems like the sound is what does the copyright strikes.
Yeah, everything I'll be playing is just videos from my own channel that I've already
sweet. Okay. Yeah, there you go, man. Yeah, it's been a long day. It's good conference though. I'm still getting used to once a month. Every 2 weeks was good, but we were burning people out. So, but then the problem with every month is like I've got for next month, I've got too many people lined up. So yeah, I would say, Bernie, try and just keep doing research on LENR also, and that way you can kind of.
Because yeah, like next time I'll try to dive into some of Maury B. King's work. He's someone that's been in the field for like 30 years. He's done lots of presentations in like the global breakthrough energy movement. I will cover also some of like Stanley Myers and a bunch of Martin Fleischmann's work as well.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man. That'd be cool.
Yeah, so
I met Moray at Tesla Tech. I don't think I've met Stanley Myers. I met Moray, and then I never met Fleischmann. I think he passed, right? But
Well, as did Stanley Myers, but I believe his brother, his twin brother, is still alive, supposedly. It would be awesome to get him on at some point.
Wait, there's Jeremy.
Okay, I'm gonna go keep setting up and loading stuff, so I will be back.
Oops, sorry. Jeremy, I just muted you on accident. Try it again.
I'm just restarting my computer. Having I told it to restart without updates, but it went ahead and is doing the updates anyway. So I'm just waiting for it to restart because my webcam and stuff just shut down on it for some reason and stopped working.
Now, are you going to try and do a presentation today? You're going to wait on the presentation, right?
I did the presentation at this conference here. I'm a little bit lagged and tired to do something today.
No, if you guys can just do an update.
I want to work on it a little bit before I present it again.
Yeah, so the only caveat would be the fellow who's Paulo, who's doing the conference, really didn't want us to cover any of their content. So, you know, so if you guys just do an update on what you saw, right? Just your experience, I don't think anyone would have complaints on that.
Yeah. I'm not going to steal. I don't want to post any of his content. Of course, my presentation is my own content, and you know, I've never gave up rights to that by speaking at his conference. So I'm going to be doing that a different version of that presentation for probably I'll do one for APEC probably. But